Unemployment is still at historic lows. Confidence is high. GDP is still solid, so the fundamentals are still good.
Though rising interest growth, a trade fight, and partial government shutdown empowered investors enough to shed more than 4,000 points from the Dow Jones Industrial Average in less than 3 months. Some analysts point to the diminishing effects of the Republican tax cut and its longer-term consequences on the national debt. President Trump has used the strong U.S. market performance since his election as proof his economic approach. With markets falling, the president tweeted, quote, "The only problem our economy has is the Fed. They don't have a market. They don't understand necessary trade wars or strong dollars or even Democrat shutdowns over borders. The Fed is like a powerful golfer who can't score because he has no touch. He can't putt." The president selected Jerome Powell to lead the Federal Reserve. Powell has intervention and exceptionally low interest rate policies that confronted the 2008 financial crisis. The New York Times reports the president has told aides he believes Powell could turn him into Herbert Hoover, the U.S. president at the beginning of the Great Depression. Bloomberg reports the president has discussed firing Powell as the Fed chair forecasts more rate increases next year. Democratic congressional leaders say, quote, "It's Christmas Eve and President Trump is plunging the country into chaos. The stock market is tanking and the president is waging a personal war on the Federal Reserve." Analysts say the market drop could also prompt a breakthrough in the administration's trade negotiations with China.
The president is going to be under a lot of pressure if this market continues to make some kind of deal. So there will be a deal, but whether
400 million for other immigration priorities. So far, the White House is not commenting on the details of the counteroffer. A senior administration official told reporters on Saturday if negotiations are going to progress, it's important for Democrats to acknowledge that physical barriers need to be part of the package.
The president's vision and understanding the wall he just doesn't get it. The things that are effective, we support. Broader negotiations, let's have them.
Incoming House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and the top Senate Democrat, Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, released a statement today that said in part, quote, "Different people from the same White House are saying different things about what the president would accept or not accept to end his Trump shutdown, making it impossible to know where they stand at any given moment. The president wanted the shutdown, but he seems not to know how to get himself out of it." President Trump planned to spend Christmas at his home in Mar-a-Lago. Instead, he stayed in Washington. The First Lady, who left for Florida on Friday, returning to spend the holidays at the White House alongside her husband. The president spending some of his time today on Twitter. "I'm all alone, poor me, in the White House, waiting for the Democrats to come back and make a deal on desperately needed border security." At one point, he went after Tennessee Senator Bob Corker, tweeting that Corker wanted to run for office again, but, quote, "poll numbers tanked when I wouldn't endorse him." Corker responding with a tweet of his own, "Yes, just like Mexico is paying for the wall. Hashtag alert the daycare staff."
This weekend, the president held a lunch meeting on border issues with members of his administration and 7 lawmakers, all of them Republicans, 4 from the House Freedom Caucus. Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer released a statement today where they said in part also that as long as the president is guided by the House Freedom Caucus, they think it's incredibly unlikely that he's going to be able to come up with a solution that could pass both the House and the Senate. Mike?
Ellison Barber live on the North Lawn. Ellison, thanks a lot. The national Christmas tree went dark over the weekend due to the partial government shutdown. Not so for the North American Aerospace Defense Command, a.k.a. NORAD. No shutdown can keep NORAD from tracking Santa's sleigh, it seems. Correspondent Doug McKelway is on Capitol Hill right now with the details on what's been affected so far, what hasn't, and what's likely to come in the days ahead.
Go first. The House will be in order. As soon as Novice, West Virginia Congressman Alex Mooney gavelled in, he gavelled out. Same on the Senate side today.
The Senate now stands adjourned until
today's pro forma session's a small sign that there's little urgency and not enough cooperation to resolve the partial government shutdown.
There is frankly no path towards his getting $5 billion in American taxpayer money to meet his campaign promise of a big, beautiful wall with Mexico.
We have to have a physical barrier.
As shutdowns go, this one has been relatively benign so far, starting on a Saturday when most federal workers were off, continuing today and tomorrow, both federal holidays, and through a traditionally slow week. The 800,000 employees affected, 25% of the federal workforce, representing 9 government departments, will be paid retroactively. Many services and areas like Arizona's Grand Canyon remain open. Governor Doug Ducey signed an executive order vowing the park, quote, will not close on our watch.
Wondering where Santa is?
Even NORAD's Santa Tracker will still keep kids apprised of the jolly old elf's global position. The Senate is set to meet again Thursday, a date that Majority Leader Mitch McConnell hopes will be fruitful.
We don't need to be here for long. 60 votes in the Senate, majority in the House, and President Trump's signature. That's what's needed.
But there is a growing unease. The shutdown may extend into the new year and the new Congress.
LBJ said sometimes you just have to hunker down like a jackass in a hailstorm and just take it. That's about where we are.
Republicans are convinced that it's not Senate Minority Leader Schumer, but Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi who's dictating the Democrats' strategy. In her quest to win House Speaker, she needs the votes of incoming open border freshmen. If she cooperates with the president before the leadership elections, the thinking goes, she risks alienating those votes.
This is, without any question, a Pelosi problem. There's no question that her speakership seems to be in balance against border security. Some would say that it gets easier after that problem is resolved on January the 3rd.
Unlike federal workers whose pay is being withheld during the shutdown, members of Congress are exempt from that. It is such a political hot potato that some members are asking that their own pay be voluntarily withheld. That while another congressman has introduced legislation to close the House sauna while the shutdown is underway. Mike?
Bit of an optics problem. Doug McKelway on Capitol Hill, thanks very much. The president responding via tweet storm to a litany of criticism over the resignations of Defense Secretary Jim Mattis and the diplomat running point on the coalition to defeat ISIS, Brett McGurk. Lucas Tomlinson brings us up to speed on the latest from the Pentagon.
Days after President Trump praised his outgoing defense secretary, Monday, the president turned on him in a tweet. We are substantially subsidizing the militaries of many very rich countries all over the world, while at the same time these countries take total advantage of the U.S. and our taxpayers on trade. General Mattis did not see this as a problem. I do, and it is being fixed. Officials say the change of heart came after the president read Mattis's resignation letter and saw the fallout in the press. On Fox News Sunday, the president's acting chief of staff admitted tensions between Mattis and the president had been simmering for months.
Let's be honest with each other. I think the relationship between these two men had been fraying. I think the president no longer relied on Mattis to be able to deliver the president's vision.
Mattis had wanted to leave in late February to make one last trip to NATO headquarters in Brussels and testify before Congress, where he would likely face tense questions about his policy differences with President Trump. But the president had other ideas. Early Sunday morning, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo called Mattis to say the president wanted him gone 2 months early. President Trump later announced on Twitter Mattis's deputy, Patrick Shanahan, a former Boeing executive and the president's point man for the proposed Space Force, would take over as acting defense secretary January 1st. The president also said Sunday he had spoken to his Turkish counterpart for the second time in 10 days about the pullout of all 2,000 American troops from Syria. President Trump appeared to pump the brakes on any immediate withdrawal, saying the pullout would now be slow and highly coordinated with Turkish forces.
Now it's this opportunity to bring our troops home with a slow withdrawal back to the United States and really focus in on ensuring that it is about keeping our troops safe.
Officials say President Trump received no assurances from Turkey's President Erdogan on Sunday to protect U.S.-backed Kurdish fighters in Syria fighting ISIS. Turkey calls the American allies in Syria terrorists. In a tweet Monday, the president says Saudi Arabia has now agreed to spend the necessary money needed to help rebuild Syria instead of the United States. In addition to Mattis, the president's top envoy to the anti-ISIS coalition also announced he was resigning due to the president's decision to pull all diplomats and soldiers out of Syria. The president said, "I do not know Bret Baier," calling him an Obama holdover.
While U.S. troops are leaving Syria, more than 5,000 will remain in neighboring Iraq and could be used to launch missions into Syria against ISIS. Mike?
Lucas Tomlinson live at the Pentagon. Lucas, thanks a lot. North Korea has been ordered by a U.S. District Court judge to pay the family of Otto Warmbier $501 million. Warmbier died shortly after his release from North Korean custody. The 22-year-old University of Virginia student was detained for 17 months after trying to return to the U.S. following a tour of North Korea. He came back with severe brain damage and in a non-responsive state. Warmbier's parents say they filed the suit against Kim Jong-un's regime for closure and justice for their son. North Korean officials deny Warmbier was tortured while in custody. President Trump tweeting out a picture of his meeting today with some of his North Korea advisors. The caption reads, quote, "Christmas Eve briefing with my North Korea team, working on North Korea, progress being made, looking forward to my next summit with Chairman Kim," end quote. The tweet can be seen as a possible overture to Pyongyang, which has been reportedly rebuffing lower-level diplomatic efforts to get it to denuclearize. Outside of Washington, consumed with controversy, Americans are doing the usual this time of year, getting ready for Christmas. And a few procrastinators, it's coming down to the wire for last-minute shopping. Jeff Flock joins us now from one of the busiest shopping districts in Chicago.
Mike, I come to you from the Magnificent Mile in Chicago, where perhaps you can see a 50-foot tall Christmas tree, emblematic of the positive Christmas that they expect here on the Magnificent Mile. Not exactly a crush of shoppers at Christmas Eve, this last shopping day before Christmas, but a healthy number. Take a look at the numbers from the National Retail Federation, which surveyed holiday shoppers. They found about 44% of all holiday shoppers had it done before this past weekend. Then another quarter or so did their final shopping on Super Saturday and Sunday over the weekend. 7% still out trying to get that last minute gift today, and largely they do that in places like this, bricks and mortar. You really can't anything anymore online and delivered in time. This is the line, by the way, for Santa Claus. Not a Santa Claus rally on Wall Street, a big down day in the market today, but that was despite the fact that retail stocks today did very well. Abercrombie & Fitch up, Best Buy up, American Eagle also up, and so a positive day, at least for retailers, which indicates perhaps a positive Christmas. There you are, seeing Santa Claus. He's one of the most popular Santa Clauses in Chicago. They say he's the real one. We'll see if this Christmas is a real Santa Claus Christmas for the retailers. Merry Christmas to you, Mike.
Merry Christmas to you, Jeff. Up next, Indonesia reels from a attack by a deadly tsunami. First, here's what our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 2 in St. Louis, Missouri Republican Governor Mike Parson his intent to repeal and replace a citizen-approved constitutional amendment. Parson opposing the Clean Missouri Initiative approved by voters in November. The way Missouri's legislative districts are drawn. Parson says the measure is unconstitutional. Fox 35 in Orlando, SpaceX launching a Falcon 9 rocket carrying what's billed as the Air Force's most powerful GPS satellite ever built. The payload is heading toward the International Space Station, and it's SpaceX CEO Elon Musk's first Pentagon-sanctioned national security mission. And this is a live look at the city of brotherly love from Fox 29 in Philadelphia. Our Philly Fox affiliate running a story about a New Jersey man who hit Lady Luck. David's alleged absentee ballots were collected from North Carolina voters by McCrae Dowless, the chief strategist for Republican Mark Harris's campaign. One voter claims he gave his signed but otherwise blank mail-in absentee ballot directly to Dowless. Tonight we're learning more about the deadly tsunami that roared ashore in Indonesia. No sirens, no text messages, no major ground convulsions to warn people enjoying themselves over the holiday weekend. William Lajeunesse has the details of the search and rescue mission.
Indonesia today mourns the dead and missing from Saturday's tsunami. 3 waves hit the islands of Java and Sumatra. The first, witnesses say, 65 feet high, destroying or damaging 700 shops, hotels, and homes.
I don't know what to say. I'm really afraid. I have not gone home in the last 2 days.
An eruption from this volcano, experts say, triggered a huge undersea landslide. Millions of tons of falling earth creating a wave that crashed onto nearby beaches.
I heard people shouting to run away, and I saw the water had gotten up to the mainland, and the hotel had been flooded by water. About 200 people were dragged by the waves.
Indonesia is a chain of islands 3,000 miles wide. It's part of the so-called Ring of Fire of earthquakes around the Pacific Rim. This is Indonesia's 3rd major disaster this year, caused by quakes, tsunamis, and volcanoes.
There was very little warning. It would have only taken about 10 minutes for the tsunami to hit the coast to the west. It took about an hour to hit it to the east, but even so, there's still very little time to get a warning out.
Most tsunamis are triggered by earthquakes. Since this one was not, the eruption never showed up on seismographs. And unlike the U.S., which maintains a network of buoys that measure wave heights, Indonesia does not have such a warning system that works.
In the new budget year of 2019, early January, I will order the replacement of broken equipment or old ones which can no longer be used.
Rescue teams continued Monday searching for victims, but time is running out.
The number of casualties is growing, and we are still able to use facial recognition software.
Officials count at least 370 dead, 120 missing, and 1,400 injured. But experts fear more to come as this volcano continues spewing lava, activity that could signal another tsunami or earthquake. Mike?
William Lajeunesse on the stunning natural disaster. William, thank you. The body of Jacqueline Cowell, the 7-year-old migrant girl who died after making the grueling journey across our southern border, is now back in her native Guatemala. She reportedly had not consumed food or water for several days before being detained by Border Patrol agents, and she died in an El Paso hospital. The Department of Homeland Security's Inspector General announced it would investigate the death. The United States has long been the top funder of the United Nations-run World Food Program. Since its inception in the 1960s, global hunger has incrementally crept down. But with violence on the upswing in Africa and parts of the Middle East, there are new reasons to worry tonight. Here's Amy Kellogg with the story from London.
These scenes should not be repeating themselves in 2018. Tape measures check tiny arms for signs of malnutrition. The World Food Program says at present it is dealing with an unprecedented 6 level 3 crises after a long period this century when hunger had been on the decline.
Well, the number one driving force for hunger today is man-made conflict. In fact, historically, it was primarily that the World Food Program was dealing with disasters like hurricanes, earthquakes, and natural disasters. But today, 80% of our expenditures are in war zones.
The World Food Program, or WFP, was founded at the urging of the United States in the 60s, and the U.S. continues to be the UN organization's biggest funder. Yemen is its most urgent case right now. 15 million are at serious risk of not having enough to eat. Save the Children says 85,000 under the age of 5 may have died from malnutrition during the war. Intense fighting keeps food and medical supplies out.
War has just brought about dire consequences. I've heard people say that it is on the brink of catastrophe. No, it's not. It is a catastrophe. I saw little children, little boys and little girls dying right before my very own eyes.
In Nigeria, Boko Haram is not only terrorizing the population in the northeast, it is starving it. Many who normally grow their own food have been moved off their land for safety and are now dependent on food aid. Most of the hundreds of thousands of Rohingya Muslims who fled persecution in Myanmar in the last year remain in squalid camps in Bangladesh. WFP's Richard Reagan said it was almost as if overnight he had a population equivalent to that of Seattle where he lives to care for and feed. But he says it's an honor to help these people.
I think we all dream about a job where we can have an impact.
In dangerous or least accessible places, airdrops are the last resort for getting food to the hungry. It is a vicious circle because conflict can lead to food insecurity, which then can lead to the recruitment of extremist fighters, some of whom say they would not agree to fight if they only had a way to feed their families. Mike?
Amy Kellogg in London. Amy, thank you. Up next, stirring images from Bethlehem's Manger Square, seeing near record. First, beyond our borders tonight, Afghanistan's capital, Kabul, reportedly quiet now after hours of gunfire between police and attackers who stormed a government building. Authorities are now reporting 25 killed and 20 wounded in the firefight and suicide bombing. Last we heard, police were going floor to floor searching for any remaining gunmen. Former Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif sentenced to 7 years in prison for corruption. His political party calling the sentence a black stain on the justice system. Sharif was removed last year from power over the corruption allegations, and he denies time. Thousands are making the trip this year despite the recent violence consuming the region. And as Trey Yingst reports from Bethlehem, it's one of the busiest Christmas seasons there on record.
Hours before nightfall in the ancient city of Bethlehem, thousands gathered to celebrate Christmas Eve. The events began with a procession of the Latin Patriarch from Jerusalem to Bethlehem. Representatives of the Vatican were joined by Boy Scouts and marching bands as they paraded into Manger Square. For the city of Bethlehem, the celebration is an important tourist attraction to bolster the local economy.
All Palestinians are coming from different cities, and the whole world is looking towards Bethlehem. Tourists are coming also from all over the world to celebrate this day with us.
The Christmas Eve parade and religious ceremonies come amid heightened tension between Israelis and Palestinians. In the past month, 2 attacks in the West Bank left an Israeli baby and 2 Israeli soldiers dead. The attacks leading to protests across the West Bank as Palestinians clashed with Israeli forces. Despite the violence, people from around the world were not deterred from attending, including a man from California.
What you see and what you hear are 2 different things. What we hear is just people are having a good time and people are just celebrating, the birth of Christ, and, everybody's having fun. So we're glad that we're part of it. That's number 1 in my bucket list, and this is, the right place, the right time, the right people, the right atmosphere, and everything is beautiful.
The Christmas celebrations in Bethlehem come amid news that the Israeli elections will take place in April, further delaying the rollout of a Trump administration peace plan between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Mike?
Trey Yingst tonight in the Holy Land. Trey, thanks a lot. Well, all is quiet and thankfully so for a faithful Christmas in Manger Square. For some Catholics, these holidays are marred by the ongoing sexual misconduct crisis. Here's Chief Religion Correspondent Laura Green with that story.
I have yet to be able to separate what happened to me from Christmas.
For Sean Doherty, Christmas is a difficult time of year, always has been, since he was 10 years old when he says he was sexually abused by a trusted priest, his Catholic school's basketball coach.
A part of you dies as a child. You lose the ability to trust people. And for some of us, you lose the ability to believe in the faith that you're being taught. The experience never goes away. It is a baggage that I will carry with me for the rest of my life.
Despite being the season of joy and goodwill, there's a shadow over the Catholic Church, the clergy sex abuse crisis. The Pennsylvania grand jury report over the summer revealed some 300 abusive priests and at least 1,000 victims going back 70 years. Doherty is named as one of the victims in that report. Several states and countries have launched their own investigations exposing a global problem within the Church. At his annual Christmas luncheon, New York's Cardinal Timothy Dolan conceded these are challenging times for all Catholics.
What in the world do we need to do to heal and recuperate? And there's a temptation to darkness, right? I need to remind myself of this because there's been a lot of darkness in the Church. I hear it from our beloved victims. I hear it from their families. I hear it from our priests. I hear it from people like you.
Catholics interviewed by Fox News said the abuse crisis hasn't shaken their faith, but made them more aware that priests are far from perfect.
We're all fallen people. I'm angry with the bishops. I'm angry at the Pope. But it won't stop me from attending Mass and being devoted.
And that victims need their support.
I do think we need to pray for them because they were people who put their faith in those people who are in authority. And that's a really terrible thing for people who are in positions of power to abuse that.
Catholic officials are responding. In February, the Pope meets with all his bishops in Rome to address the abuse crisis. For many victims like Doherty, the good news is they need no longer suffer in silence. In that way, this Christmas has brought a glimmer of hope. In New York, Lauren Green, Fox News.
On the same day that a Massachusetts district attorney announced indecent assault charges against actor Kevin Spacey, the former star is putting out a YouTube video entitled "Let Me Be Frank," laced with seeming double entendres. Listen to this.
Despite all the poppycock, the animosity, the headlines, the impeachment without a trial, despite everything, despite even my own death, I feel surprisingly good. And my confidence grows each day that soon enough you will know the full truth.
The Cape and Islands District Attorney announcing charges today of felony indecent assault and battery against Spacey. He's accused of allegedly sexually assaulting the teenage son of a news anchor at a Nantucket bar in July 2016. Free speech notwithstanding, Argentine authorities coming up with a novel punishment for one of the country's well-known radio shock jocks. Ansel Echecobar was charged with disrespecting and insulting women after using terms like feminazis and disgusting people on his program. He's now been ordered by the courts to host a feminist guest every week for 5 weeks. They get 10 minutes to talk. He cannot interrupt them, and he can't criticize them when they finish. Argentina's special prosecutor will provide a list of gender specialists for him to book on the show. Stick around for the all-star panel and President Trump's take on the market mess in finance. There are puts. President Trump this morning put it in his own words on Twitter, tweeting, "The only problem our economy has is the Fed. They don't have a feel for the market. They don't understand necessary trade wars or strong dollars or even Democrat shutdowns over borders. The Fed is like a powerful golfer who can't score because he has no touch. He can't putt." With that, let's bring in our panel. Columnist from Bloomberg Opinion, Eli Lake. Conservative writer, Kelly Jane Torrance. And commentary writer for the Washington Examiner, Tom Rogan. So what about the state of our economy, folks? Tom?
Well, I think that's right in terms of Mr. Mulvaney's comments on the economy in terms of its data strength, right? We do see that investment is high, GDP growth is strong and stable. Income growth in terms of actually not in a necessarily concerning sense with inflation, especially at the lower skilled level, which is an indicator of businesses feeling that they need more people, there's more demand. Right. But the problem is the other fundamental, the political fundamental, is not nearly as stable. And that confidence in the market, I think, has a lot more to do with some of the president's more irregular rhetoric and actions than it does with anything that the Fed is doing. And I think the president would make a very big mistake for his own political interests and the economies were he to try and take punitive action towards the Fed.
Kelly Jane?
Yeah, I hope Mick Mulvaney is telling President Trump that the economy goes up and down because the president himself doesn't seem to know, realize that. Now, of course, he wanted to take credit when it was going up. But let's face it, the stocks went up partly building in. They started going up even before Trump became president after he was elected because they were building in what they thought he was going to do. And that stuff came, a lot of it, deregulation, tax cuts. Well, the effect of that has dropped off a bit. So, of course, things are going to change. I sort of joke, like, buy gold. Whenever the president starts getting into trying to get the Fed to do what he wants him to do politically, you're going to see problems. And, of course, that happened with Nixon in the 1970s. And really, that can only be traced to getting rid of the gold standard. But, hey, buy gold while you can.
Eli?
Most economies believe that there are cycles to the economy, and we are probably due for a recession at this point. So some of that is to be expected. But the president is making things far worse by threatening to do something that no president has done, which is to fire the Fed chief because he doesn't like a decision he makes. There's a reason why we want the chairman of the Federal Reserve to be independent from the president. The temptation is too great to juice the economy for a short-term benefit if you're a president, and to ignore the long-term or medium-term consequences. So in that respect, once again, President Trump is playing with fire.
I want to play some sound from Stephen Moore from the Heritage Foundation. He was on the John Catsimatidis radio show in New York. Let's take a listen.
We need to be putting more dollar liquidity into the economy because there's such a demand for dollars now. All over the world, everybody wants to invest in the United States, and at the same time, the world wants more dollars. The Fed is sucking them out of the economy, and it's really hurt the stock market.
So he's pounding on the Fed a little bit as well, Eli.
Listen, I'm not an economist, but I think there's a reason why we have these independent guys making this decision. It's how the system has worked at this point. One can argue with that, and I'm sure that there's an argument within the Federal Reserve, but we don't want the president crossing, the stream, as it were, and interfering in that respect. I mean, and I think that that's used to be one of these non-controversial bipartisan positions.
Well, are we now sort of taking Trump's premise then that one person has all of the effect on the economy? I mean, let's face it.
That's not
right. Exactly.
It's also not right. There's
right. But you got the trade war that he's been brewing. Uncertainty, government shutdown. Markets wondering what's next. We got deregulations and tax cuts. What's the plan going forward? We haven't heard a lot from the White House on that. More just sort of sitting back on their laurels.
I do think on Stephen Moore's point, obviously Stephen Moore is very close to the White House in terms of their economic policy, but at a basic, he knows more about economics than I do. But the economists I've talked to, my father as being one of them, one of the challenges you see there is that the issue with liquidity, sure, there may be a short-term gain, but you lurking back here as the fundamental underpinning concern of the Fed is the possibility of inflation and creating artificial bubbles of artificial wealth, essentially, which was the same driver for 2008. And I think if the market starts seeing more of that injection and they don't think it's based on fundamentals, it would be more of a concern. So I think we have to be careful. Trust the Fed would be my takeaway.
Fair enough. All right, let's play some sound from Delaware Democrat Senator Chris Coons on the Fed, and I'll get you guys to react to that.
The independence of the Fed is a key linchpin of American economic security, and I plead with the president to reconsider what is a very dangerous course in economic policy.
And for balance, let's play some Pat Toomey, Republican of Pennsylvania.
I don't think that Chairman Powell is in any danger of being fired by the president. I think some of the president's comments have been unfortunate, but Chairman Powell is not going to let politics interfere with his decision-making process.
So what about that? Is the Fed chairman safe? Kelly Jane?
Yeah, it's very clear that President Trump would like to fire him, or at least is seriously considering it. And I wonder if people like Mick Mulvaney and Pat Toomey saying this are actually trying to get Trump not to do it.
Right.
And let's face it, he can do it with cause, is how the legislation reads. So it's possible that he will do it and can do it. But, again, I think we're putting a lot of emphasis on one man and what he's doing. And I think, the American economy is very strong. It's, of course, going to take it's going to take these things as signs, sure. But eventually there would be a new chair if he were fired, and things would go along. Now there would be definitely some volatility in the meantime, but I think eventually things would flatten out.
Eli?
Listen, in another area, we saw the president hinting for the last year and a half he's going to get out of Syria, he's going to get out of Afghanistan. All of his advisors, all his military generals are saying it's a bad idea. This is how we should do it. And then eventually he ends up doing it. So I worry that even though the people around him saying, no, we wouldn't go that far, this would be so extreme, that eventually, the president will do what he wants to do. And usually these cycles are that he threatens to do something, and then when we think he's made his decision not to do it, he ends up doing it. So I'm worried.
I don't think he'll do it for the simple reason that Eli is absolutely right, that the president does what he wants to do, and anyone else can take a hike. But at the simple point, the economy matters to his political interest and to his base interest. The Syria decision, as much as it was a bad idea, didn't matter to that same component. And so I think that ultimately, with everyone saying him, if you want the markets to be stable, that's the worst possible thing you can do. A big back